So we'll open the meeting of the Environment and Natural Areas Committee for January 15th. And just again to acknowledge the territory we're on tonight, the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and the Sioux Nation, the Songhees Nation, and the Cheyenne Nation is upon our lands that we're meeting tonight. So I've got the agenda here, and we've got some pinks to add, so if we add those to the agenda. And then I wondered if we might do as we did just a moment ago in Public Works. We're going to have a presentation by Neil West, who's part of the Metchosin Invasive Species Cooperative, and we could follow that after some public participation just to talk about the recommendations that Neil's brought forward. If that would be the people's, if everyone's satisfied with that, we will proceed with the agenda as amended. Looks like we're good to go.
Did I give you that dauber, Steve?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, about halfway through the presentation, I'm going to mention what you're seeing in these images here, and there's going to be 7 pages of images. And each one of these images is a holly, what I'm referring to, and it's been accepted by people like Andy McKinnon and so forth, as a holly dead zone. So what we've done is we've limbed that large trunk you can see. So, well, you know the one I mean. And the drip line around a mature holly basically kills everything that's under it, okay? So Marie-Therese and Jay have been with MISC since day one, and Steve's been helping out for the last while. And I'm going to mention one of the big reasons we were able to get this work done was the Parks and Trails Committee, and I see Brent's here. He was part of that committee when they passed a unanimous resolution to do this work. And I see we got Dan Cote and Katie Nelson here. They're part of our group. And like I say, the 3 people on council have been, Marie-Therese and Jay have been with us since day one. So in the spring of 2018, Mark Atherton and I surveyed the holly problem in Metchosin Parks. That April, Brenda and I made a presentation to the Parks and Trails Committee, and the committee passed a unanimous resolution to remove all holly from district parks. For the next year, a small group of volunteers, primarily made up of members of the Metchosin Parks and Trails Committee, worked to remove holly in district parks. In early May of 2019, Metchosin Invasive Species Cooperative, or MISC, was formed, and shortly thereafter we successfully applied for a 5-year $20,000 grant from the Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation. We have 1 year left in the grant, and to date we have received $4,121. We purchased various pieces of equipment, primarily several polar bears. I'm going to just push ahead one. Yeah, there you go. So there's another holly dead zone. Early on, we had site visits with 5 local experts, as well as local MLA Mitzi Dean, who I believe was instrumental in getting us taken seriously by the CRD, which was a struggle. From summer 2019 to spring 2023, MISC volunteers worked a total of 453 hours in district parks, removed thousands of stems, and on April 29, 2023, we removed the last of the holly from the 5 primary district parks, 230 acres at 0 cost to the district. We manually pulled all the holly we could and limbed those trees too large to pull, up to about 6 feet, to prevent the lower limbs from touching the ground and layering. 65% of the spread of holly is the lower limbs touching the ground, and they'll put out vines from here past the door, and then there may be multiple leaders come up from those vines. We manually pulled all the holly we could and limbed those trees too large. Sometime later, those trees too large to pull, hundreds of stems were eliminated using cut stump herbicide application applied by a licensed contractor and 3 volunteer licensed assistant applicators, applying only to the cambium area, so the outside layer of a trunk. So there's our dog standing in another. That one's not so big, but the trees weren't that big. But you have to realize you're not going to see a tree in this presentation that's fully grown. And we pulled thousands. You have to get quite large before you get a dead zone. And we pulled thousands of small ones that, according to the science, are mostly going to become big ones because the mortality rate is very low. So in the summer months, MISC turns its attention to tansy ragwort. MISC has loaned tools out to several other volunteer groups totaling 223 hours, local private property owners for an estimated of 323 hours, Hans Helgeson School for 7.5 hours, for a grand total of 961 hours. After a long struggle with the CRD, on June 19, 2021, we had our first holly pull in Matheson Lake Park. After 178 volunteer hours, we have pulled more than 10,000 rooted holly from an area of approximately 25 acres. Now that's far and away the worst part of the park, but there's holly in other parts of the park. But try and imagine 10,000 mature holly in an area of 25 acres, and how much dead zone you're going to have under that, okay? We have been joined by a group of East Sault residents who have been successful in gaining access to East Sault Regional Park, as well as the Royal Canadian Marine Search and Rescue property. In the fall of 2023, we were approached by Alex Hoffman-Ellis, a teacher at Westmont School, regarding a group of Westmont students working with MISC on invasives. We are currently in discussion with the CRD regarding Whitties as well as Souk Hills. So the the Westmont kids, there's 27 of them, want to work with MISC, and they seem to have broken through with the CRD to get into Whitties, which Andy McKinnon tried to do about 10 years ago, and they told him to go away. So, why holly? I've already explained that somewhat, well, for the most part. Now, there's a large one, that's in Metchosin Park. So this is an extract from Andy McKinnon. I sent Andy these same images, the same presentation, basically, and asked him to comment on his feelings, since that's what he studies. Is Marie Trace probably knows better than I do the mycology and so forth, and you know, the underground stuff, right? The soils and what's in the soils. So above ground in ecosystems, biological diversity and stability depends in part on its species diversity. In a forest den with dead zones, plant species diversity and richness is reduced, and so is the diversity of species that depend upon that plant, including insect species and microbial species. That's a problem. Additionally, by altering the above-ground plant species diversity, dead zones fundamentally change back below-ground ecosystems. Plants represent the major input of energy, carbohydrates, and other materials to below-ground ecosystems. When these plants are removed, e.g. in holly dead zones, below-ground ecosystems are disrupted with unknown consequences, because according to Andy, that is, in this sort of context, it's never been studied. Removing holly and allowing dead zones to recover to native plant communities will have the effect of restoring above ground and presumably below ground communities. So this is an extract from James Muskelly, who's responsible for the environmental integrity of the Rocky Point properties, which is a huge piece of property. D&D devotes considerable funds to the control of high priority species like broom, gorse, holly, and others. This from the Invasive Species Council of BC. They sent us a letter of support for what we were doing. Major invasive disruptor of the Gary Oak and fir ecosystems. Cut stump sucker profusely. Can grow in shade or sun. Seeds are easily spread by birds. It monopolizes groundwater. And a lot of the places we're seeing dead zones is in riparian areas, which I'm told by, I'm a high school grad, but I'm told by people with their PhDs that's a big deal. Peterkin and Lloyd, 1967, one tree may produce 120,000 seeds a season. Andy Berger, soil impacts due to the invasion of holly, has the ability to readily establish itself in otherwise undisturbed forests. So it can establish itself in old growth, it doesn't care. Doug Roof's got holly growing under 300-year-old fir trees at his place. Significantly affects species composition and ecosystem function in native forests. Lives up to 250 years. Significant impact to the soil chemistry, and I'd like Marie Trace at one point to comment on this. On average, 15% more sulfur beneath a canopy of holly. Now, according to my son, the biologist, he figures that would pretty much kill any mammal. So David Stokes and Elliot Church, pictures of an invasion, proliferating and spreading rapidly, vegetative expansion of tree clumps and long-distance dispersal via seed. So again, it's 65% lower branches touch the ground, 35% where you can go for 2 kilometers and you come across another holly patch, which is what I'm really worried about, it getting deep into more wilderness areas like the Souk Hills, which we're concerned, you know, I've taken the CRD and shown them some big patches in there. So spread appears to be accelerating. Now, all these studies came out of Washington State, and they talk about the ecosystem. It was sword ferns and Douglas fir and shallal, so pretty much identical to what we have. Spread appears to be accelerating. Population and canopy area both increasing approximately exponentially, having doubling times of approximately 6 and 5 years respectively. So doubling every 6 to 5 years. So, but by the time my son's age, there'll be about 32 times more holly out there if we just sit back and watch it. High rates of establishment and very low rates of mortality. And CRD toxic to humans. So that's just about it, but I'm going to talk about what I think we need to do now that we've got the parks cleaned up. Having worked on holly for approximately 10 years and seeing the dead zones as well as holly's very low mortality rate and very dense growth, it's become very clear to me if holly is not brought back under control, there will be a devastating damage done to our local ecosystems. I'm convinced this needs to be done, and I'm also convinced it can be done, because I was amazed at how much work we were able. I didn't think we'd be halfway through this process yet, and here we are, cleaned up all the parks in not much more than 4 years. I thought it was going to be 8, and we'll be sort of patting each other on the back, you know. I encourage the district to lead by example. With the help of MISC, I believe we need to remove holly from all public lands in Metchosin, perhaps starting with Metchosin boulevards, where there are dozens of berry-producing trees. And we need to do, because there's male and female trees, and not all female trees will berry right away. They need a certain amount of sun. But when you get on the boulevards, that's where it gets lots of sun, lots of moisture, and that's what holly loves. And we need to do what we can to raise the awareness of the public and encourage them, perhaps with the help of MISC, to remove holly from their properties, including former holly farms. We could also pressure other levels of government to stop allowing the sale of problematic invasives by nurseries and florists. So the CRD has holly on its control list, but they still allow people to sell it, which kind of sounds kind of dumb to me. But, you know, so they put the CRD is starting to put considerable amount of money into getting it under control. At the same time, they're still allowing people to propagate it and sell it. So, you know, and there's other things you can replace it with. So that's zone 4. And that is in Metchosin Park. Here's another big one in Metchosin Park, not far from the previous one. And that's why another thing, the science, here's on the left picture, you can see me standing in the next dead zone. So apparently what happens, according to the science, you get these different patches. And over time they spread and they just turn into one great big patch, right? So I don't know if there's anybody here from the apex predator group, but if the deer don't have anything to eat, I'm not sure what the predators are going to eat, and it's just, you know, it's that whole cycle, right? And what you should also note is that image was taken in May of 2021, the trees were taken down in May of 2021. That image was taken, and I should have put the date on there for that, but I wasn't thinking. But that was taken about 3 months ago. So as you can see, after better than 2 years, going on 3 years, it hasn't really started to come back yet. So I'm not a scientist, but I suspect it's going to take a while for that soil to neutralize and the native stuff to come back. I bet, who knows? But we do have I got an email from Nancy Shackelford, the professor of ecosystem restoration. She's the director of ecosystem restoration at UVic. And she has a student, and that's what he wants to study. It's understory, soil chemistry and that sort of stuff. So Marie Therese knows better how big a deal this is. I don't think it's that big a deal, but the kid's not a practicum student, I think. Mm-hmm. So he would be working on a bachelor's, right? But if he says he wants to get into research and research this sort of thing. So it could lead to something like a master's paper or their thesis or what I'm hoping. But anyway, at least it's getting attention. Nancy wouldn't be sending somebody out if she didn't think it was worth looking at, I wouldn't think. So there's another one. That's a smaller one, but again, so what I'm trying to show you is all the shalal and all the ferns and all of a sudden there's just nothing. You see? And it's killing everything. So to me, like I said, I'm a high school grad, but I had some serious concerns just based on what I was seeing, and then Andy basically backed up everything I was concerned about. So one of the things, I thought we talked about the first one. One of the things my wife Brenda suggested about 3 years ago, we had BC Hydro come in and cut the trees down under the lines to clear the lines. Well, along Hackney Valley Road, there's all kinds of holly that's growing up into the power lines. Well, I'm wondering if we could make a deal with them where save yourself from work, just cut the whole thing down, take the whole tree down, and at some later date, you have to treat a stump as soon as it's cut. So what we could do is MISC, and along with your roads crew if you wanted us to, whatever works. I'm happy to do whatever works. But what we could do is have Hydro take them down, and at the convenience of those others, you come along, make a fresh cut, treat the stump, put a pot over it. That's what Saanich does. They treat the stump, put a pot over, says district of Saanich, invasive control, herbicide use or something. Well, legally, the pot can come off after 3 hours. That's what Rick Hatchett Sandage told me. But he usually leaves it on there for a week or two just to make sure everybody's comfortable. But I really think that, when you're talking about, and I think I missed a part. Did I mention that?
Neil, I think we're running against the clock here, but you've given us a couple of recommendations, and so how about if we just talk a little bit about that part of it?
Sure.
So I wanted just first, we didn't have a chance to introduce Neil when he stood up. Neil West from Metchosin Invasive Species Cooperative. Thanks so much, Neil. This is a great group, and in fact, this year they were awarded the 2023 Friends of the Earth Award at Community Day. And you just heard about the tremendous hard work that the group's been doing. Now, he mentioned my name being associated with this, but I've picked a few. I picked a few ivy stems. Hardly done much work at all. But imagine this: 230 acres, 25 acres, thousands of stems, 10,000 stems. This is a lot of work. The recommendations that Neil's brought to us today involve the idea of dealing with holly on the right-of-ways, but the roadsides and stuff like that. And so I'd like to make the following motion, if someone's seconded, we could talk a little bit about it, that the Environment Committee recommend to Council that staff work with MISC, Metchosin Invasive Species Cooperative, on the removal of holly from Metchosin road right-of-ways and boulevards. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Anybody like to say a word about that?
I'm very much in support of that motion, and of course we have to look at a way of balancing staff time and resources, of course, but as you're saying, Mr. West, it is a serious problem, and your photos bring it out actually much more so than I probably previously appreciated, and I've stood in a bunch of holly clearings. Yeah.
One of the things that Neil suggested talking about this issue is that it's kind of a question of timing, and so that if he could work with our new CAO and the Public Works crew, if I may, Neil, what Neil's proposing is that the MISC group would take some action, say, on the length of road, timing it with Public Works, and so that Public Works knows what's going on and not it being coordinated in a collaborative way, rather than striking out on their own and then being a big problem to clean up. So it's more the idea of working together and seeing what they can do rather than dictating just how it would work. But if you remember the very first part of Neil's presentation, they received a large grant. If I may, Neil's a bit of a penny pincher, and he's pulled it off without spending hardly anything. And he's, in our discussions, quite sensitive to the issue of the district's resources as well. And so his idea is to work together as able and see what can be done, mostly to get rid of this holly.
Can I make one comment? We don't have, one thing we could do to make it easy for the roads guys, you don't have to cut the tree down right away. I've come up with a method where you take a wire wheel on a drill and you girdle the tree. Because a piece of holly has a really soft, kind of smooth bark, so it's really easy to do. I can girdle a holly with a wire wheel. The wheel's about this thick and about that wide. I can girdle the holly in under a minute, and now you can use your dauber to just treat that girdle. So now you're going to end up with a dead standing holly, but it's not coming down anytime soon. So now your Public Works guys can come along at their leisure and say, okay, well, we've got nothing to do. Let's cut down 6 holly and haul them off or something. And it makes excellent firewood, in case anybody's wondering. So, okie doke.
The question will be things like fire risk and that sort of thing. Councillor Donaldson?
Yeah, in speaking with, collaborating with staff, we have a similar situation when CRD Water is putting in, upgrading water lines, that sort of thing, and when they do, we get things like roadside trails. So it's all about communication and what the schedules are as opposed to a one-off. And so with staff like the Public Works and this can communicate and get something going seasonally or whatever, then that would be optimal.
Great. Mary Little?
Yeah, I was just through the chair. Neil, do you have your license now for administering the pesticide?
Brendan and I and Kathy Atherton have our applicator's assistant license. I've often said I'd give serious consideration to getting the full license, but it's going to cost me over $1,000 and a lot of work. And unless I got the work lined up that's gonna justify it, it doesn't make any sense to me. I'd rather pay that young kid we got $1,000 than me go through that for $1,000 worth of messing about with the provincial government, so no, but Derek charges out at 50 an hour, and the going rate the CRD's paying is 100. And with Derek comes our 3 volunteers, and usually if there's 4 applicators, we usually have 4 people. In the parks, we always had 4 other volunteers cutting, like Gord Stodola and Mark, and cutting with chainsaws. So you're getting an awful lot of value out of that $50 an hour from Derek.
Okay.
So, and we could be working with him on the boulevards if we had this, had the system set up right, So.
Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. So maybe, unless there's other comments or questions, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Now the second issue, there was an action I think for myself, and that's that I'll speak to the CRD, the CRISP, the Capital Regional Invasive Species group, about the issues around disallowing sales in local nurseries and florists. What I've heard before is that these questions of invasives relate to, I suppose it's the free market, the issues that we have there, but I'll have a word with them based on the discussion tonight.
One of the things that we could do as a council, we could send a letter to all our neighboring municipalities asking them not to plant holly, because when we were working, Councillor Donaldson and Chukin and I volunteering at the Sarah Beckett run, as we were going down to the stadium, we all noticed, hey, they planted all these hollies here. So, yeah, a whole hedgerow of bought at a nursery and planted holly. So that's one thing we could do.
I'll take that as a motion.
Yeah, well, I propose that we write a letter to all our neighboring municipalities to encourage them not to plant invasive holly, or any holly, in their municipality.
I'll second.
Second, any discussion?
I just wondered if we include a couple of the other invasives, like the ivy, the daphne, those sorts of things.
Good work.
Good. Is anybody planting daphne?
I don't know, it's been a bumper crop year for daphne, I have to say. I thought I got rid of it all, and it's not all come back, but it's coming back great.
We'll just take it as the problematic invasives. So maybe we'll take a vote on that. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Now, I sort of blew it there. I meant to have public participation after the presentation, and if anybody wanted to comment on it, but I welcome anyone who'd like to get up to the microphone at this point.
Katie Nelson, and I just wanted to make one comment. We need to not just send this letter to, we need to not just send this letter to nurseries and florists, because it's at places like Canadian Tire that are, just more general, and Lowe's and all of those kind of places where they're also selling a lot of holly, seasonal, and even, just like, oh, it's spring, it's nursery time, and they sell it there too. So if we could broaden that scope of where we ask businesses not to, that would be a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're just going to grab this, but we went, in all the trees, we did hundreds of trees. We went through just over 2 of those with herbicide. That's all we used. Brenda bumped into a guy in one of the parks the other day and says, oh, we're not seeing any mushrooms because they sprayed the whole place for holly. Well, there was no spraying. There was, all it is like a bingo dauber. You just daub the outside, and that's it.
Is this yours? Yeah, is this yours?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Will you entertain a related comment?
Please.
Not to holly, but okay. This is with respect to another invasive species, the bullfrog. I just wanted to speak strongly in favor of the recommendation from Stan Orchard to continue and intensify the bullfrog program in Metchosin. I'm not sure how many members of this council are aware that I was actively involved in the bullfrog control program in Highlands for the last 9 years that I lived there. The 10-acre lake, private lake that I moved where I was a tenant, when I moved there, it was bullfrog soup. When you swam in the summer, you were bumping into bullfrog tadpoles all the time, and it was quite gross. With a few years of intensive bullfrog control, bullfrogs became very rare. Now, Stan Orchard's program can't possibly be as intensive as the volunteer effort that we put in was, but he's doing a good job when he's able of keeping the bullfrogs and Metchosin to a dull roar. And believe me, we want it. We dissected bullfrogs and found them that they were eating the native frogs, they were eating birds, they were eating small rodents. They're a real danger to our ecosystem.
Thank you.
Nicole Shippen, Lavina resident. First, I just want to raise my glass to Neil and Brenda West, because the work, the difference they have made. We walk around Matheson Lake Park all the time, and it's just amazing the difference that their work and the teamwork has made. So I also just want to appreciate the report on the evaluation framework for Metchosin's climate action plan. And in the report, there's an idea floated of an advisory committee that would be tasked with tracking climate actions as they unroll. And I think that is a good idea. I'm not so sure about the need for a poll, however, and I'm thinking back to the climate action survey, or the initial survey that happened last year. And one thing I wonder is whether the results of the survey are public, or whether we can have them publicly posted on the website to see the results of that survey before a poll unrolls. Thank you.
Sorry, could you point me to the recommendation of an advisory committee?
Well, I think it just is in the report, if I recall, or it's some sort of group that would track, if I'm recalling correctly. Yeah, sorry, I don't have it right here, but
That a community group be formed, blah, blah.
yeah, sorry, it's a community group.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not remembering that exactly, but there is a notion, a recommendation to encourage a community-led climate change and sustainability lecture series, if that's what you're referring to. We can talk about it offline. Let's do that.
I'll have to refer to the report
Great,
itself,
thanks.
but I'm hoping there will be a group that would track the efforts as
We'll talk about that tonight when we get to that agenda item. Thank you very much for the suggestion.
Hi, Diana Smith, 4488 William Head Road. I live near Holly Forest, so I just had a recommendation. When it's on private land, maybe not only talking to the property owner, but maybe if there could be volunteer groups to help do work parties to remove it if the property owner is interested in that. 'Cause it's a lot of work, and I think that people would be interested in that.
Certainly, and I think the track record of MISC is one to be admired, and they're working with private property owners. So anybody who would like to talk to Neil or others, there's a limitless work in Holly. Whether or not there's limitless volunteer hours, I'm not sure, but Neil's been working in the group and working in the parks and in private lands, and now this suggestion lately is to go onto the public boulevards. But absolutely key activity.
Beth Baker, Metchosin resident, and I want to encourage you to keep on with the bullfrog extermination if you can. And I also raise my glass to MISC for all the excellent work they've done. They've been tireless and very effective. What I'd like to talk about, which I sent to you just before I came, so that you'll have this to read before you go to bed tonight. But I want to talk about the action plan. And in my years of teaching, I went to so many good workshops and so many good courses, and I'd come out all enthused and we had all the right ideas. It's the application that's so hard. What do I do Monday morning? How do I transition into actually using this information, these new ideas and these new tools? And I find this a little weak in how we move forward. I think we have all the right ideas for what's needed, but how we move forward is a little unclear. And I think it depends too much on volunteerism. And what I see as being most effective is the work that council can do with the support of volunteers. But you're going to be needing to liaise with other districts, liaise with CRD, liaise with the provincial and federal governments. Only council can do that. I mean, we can do the my teaching friend used to call it the donkey work, but you have to take the leadership role. You can't just say that MISC or the other community groups will take the lead on this. I don't think that's going to be effective. So I've picked out my favorite bits from the Climate Action Plan, the actions that I think will pay the biggest dividends. I like the big picture described on the last page. That's page 4 here, where it says that there's going to be some designated people who will make it their mission to quote, promote the principle that much of what Metchosin's climate action role is to provide or to preserve the natural environment and take full advantage of the ecosystem services that it provides. Our, quote, priceless natural environment needs to have its value assessed so it is recognized as a prime player in climate change mitigation and community resilience. I think that's excellent. That's the key. And of the proposed actions, I narrowed it down to 6 or 8 that I actually think would be the most effective place to put time and energy. Climate change and sustainability lecture series. I like external funding for new habitat protection and restoration projects. I like purchase and covenant new habitat protection areas. I like wetland and riparian restoration, invasive species management, climate change considerations integrated into planning and policy development, and groundwater protection and conservation. And the other ideas are all great, but they're just not as powerful. I see these tasks, as I said, being led by council and staff and supported by volunteers. The way the plan is written seems to rely too heavily on volunteers, and the leadership, monitoring, evaluating, and coordinating has to be done by our elected representatives. Since we're at budget time, it seems to me that some of these actions need to have funding set aside for them. It's all well and good to say we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, but you have to budget for it. You have to provide for it, or it won't happen. So I'd like the district, this is going above and beyond here, to really get serious about having a land acquisition budget. We've got nothing in the kitty. When we come to the table, we come with our hand out, but we've got nothing to offer. I think this could be funded in part by donations and bequests, and people get a tax receipt for donating to our land acquisition fund. People leave something in their will to it. I mean, we should have a fund there that when we come to the table asking for provincial and federal money or CRD money or from the other foundations, we have something to put on the table too. And this is the Bacon real estate plan. I can picture using the same money to do serial purchases. And the plan is, and this is it's already in CRD's book of tricks. And that's how they got Bilston Farm, and they got what they wanted out of it. They got it in possession of a conservation outcome, and they got their easement. They wanted a service access road in there. They got that. They got it set up the way they wanted, and then they could because they owned it. They could choose who they sold it to and under what conditions. And they accidentally made $100,000 profit. But you can then take that same money and do it again with another property and do it over and over and over again. If you get the seed money, if we got the seed money of a couple $1 million, we could do this plan over and over again and save lots of properties. And there's a lot. I want to skip to the end because I'm probably running out of time.
That's right.
That there's a lot that can be done through the process of saving forests, fields, and farms by looking at outdated zoning and bylaws. And, people like our OCP, it's generally good, but it doesn't envision large acreages. The district at, quote, build out could have nothing bigger than 5 and 10 acre lots.
Yeah.
So I urge council, that's last line there, I urge council to look into downzoning options before all our large acreages are gone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Sandra Lamb, Metchosin resident. Tonight I'd like to speak to the importance of and for the protection of Metchosin's wild spaces. Our wild spaces are untamed areas with minimal human interference. They are wind and noise buffers, watershed protectors, air filters, home to animals, birds, insects, fungi, and Kelty's report reminded me shade. Each space is a unique ecosystem comprised of flora and fauna, including old-growth trees. Together they serve as corridors for the safe movement of wildlife. People identify Metchosin as rural with certain lands in the ALR. But let's not forget, Metchosin has wild spaces that deserve protection as well. With the ongoing substantive expansion of Langford and Colwood right next to our border, we must be cognizant to developers eyeing our wild spaces like a weasel in a chicken coop. Let us not let our guard down and give developers the opportunity to destroy our wild spaces. Let us protect our wild spaces and the Metchosin biocultural identity to the extent that we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who is that lady? I like her.
Me too.
Sandra Lamb, I believe.
Good evening, committee. My name is Brent Donaldson, Chalister Court. I also like to throw an accolade towards Brenda and Neil. As a member of the Bilston Habitat Society, they came out one day and spent some time with us in Langford, actually, at the Luxton area of Firehall Creek. There's gorse there, and I can't say enough about their enthusiasm. Thank you very much, and I look forward to working with them in the future. I'd like to speak to item 6B of the agenda, enhance riparian area protection. Certainly, the stringent provincial regulations dictate setbacks and the like, but as being mentioned here several times in different examples, whether it's the fire chief or Neil, is that education. It's great to have bylaws, but most of the folks don't open the bylaw book up. So I think it's really important, certainly from dealing or working with the Bilston group, is this getting folks aware of what's actually happening in riparian zones, and maybe articles in the Muse. Education's a lot cheaper than bylaws. Bylaws take staff time and they take enforcement. So I strongly encourage, when we talk about riparian areas and stream side protection, that we consider the educational component, because that's a minimal charge to the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other takers, maybe we'll move along. Thanks very much to everybody who's spoken this evening. The next item on our agenda is adoption of minutes, the Environment and Natural Areas Committee meeting of November 27th.
So moved. Move adoption.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Schuppen, seconded by Councillor Epp. Any discussion? With minutes, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. The next is receipt of minutes from the MISC, the Environmental Advisory Select Committee meeting of November 28th.
Move receipt.
Thank you, Councillor Epp. And the seconder?
Second. Move receipt.
Seconded by Councillor Schuppen. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried, thank you. Then business arising, on page 23 of the agenda package, are several recommendations from MISC. And the first one relates to the Bullfrog Management Project. So for quite a number of years now, we've had a contract with a herpetologist, Dan Orchard, and he has some crews that go out and address the bullfrog problem. And you'll see at page 25 of your agenda package, a report that's been provided by Stan for this past year. Things are a little bit slowed in a couple of occasions this year with illness, but in the end, quite a few frogs were picked up, and it's looking pretty good. Our line item budget for this is $3,600, and there's been no change recommended by staff nor by MISC. And in fact, the motion is, and I'll read it, that the Environment Committee recommend that Council support Stan Orchard's recommendations that Metchosin continue bullfrog control work in 2024. I think it's been a positive thing for the flora and fauna of Metchosin that we carry this on, and we just wanted to bring it before Council, or before Environment Committee this evening. So I've made the motion. Would somebody like to second it?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor Donaldson. In discussion. Councillor Schueten.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. And it was interesting reading Mr. Orchard's report. And the one thing that I took heart on is near the end of the year or the end of the summer maybe, we did get reports of bullfrogs in certain areas, and they're here on the in the report, and he just wasn't able to get them. So
Yeah.
ideally next year. But yeah, but thanks for following this, and yeah, fully support continuing the program.
Great. Councillor Donaldson.
Does Mr. Orchard have staff that works with him?
Yes, he does. I mean, each year I think it changes depending on, I believe it's students and others. So I'm not sure the number of crews next year, but he's planning on making a big push.
Okay. Thank you.
We're billed according to the work that he does.
Yes, I do know that there have been reports, and I know somebody that's interested in that kind of work, so if he's looking for an employee, I know somebody.
Perfect. I think he'd appreciate the reference. Thank you. So maybe I'll call the question. All in favor? Great, carried. The second recommendation is one about the, from MISC, is about the Riparian Protection Act, which is the sort of the legislation of the province that governs the protection of riparian areas. And the act itself, the whole idea here would be doing something within and under the act. So what the district might be able to do. At the moment, the legislation exists as it does, and we follow certain procedures in terms of subdivisions and developments and that sort of thing that are in the act, but we're doing the minimum required, and we could be doing more. And so quite a number of municipalities are doing more. And what they're doing is protecting larger parts of larger distances from the stream side, how much is going to be protected. At the moment, what happens is that stream sides are protected up to 30 meters, and then in the event of subdivision or development, as we saw with the Beckingham development, a qualified environmental professional is brought in, and they say, well, actually, you can get us closer to the stream over here. You can go with 10 meters, and here maybe 15, here's 30, and back to 10. 10 being the closest you can possibly get to a stream. Whereas it's possible under legislation that we could declare in Metchosin, 30 meters is the measure for a developer, the area that needed to be protected. But moreover, it would be also for established landowners that you would protect that, meaning no buildings or disturbances in the area close to the stream. That's an example. What the motion is getting to is, could we get some advice from staff on doing a better job, or what are the opportunities that we see? And we just heard from resident Brent Donaldson saying, what about education? That would be the kind of measures also that we want to be involved in. So it's not just legislation, but what's out there, and what are the things that we might do to enhance protection of, for example, the Bilston Creek. I've spoken to people in the Bilston Creek Watershed Habitat Protection Association. They're quite keen on the idea that there's more that could be done. I have not spoken lately to the APRM, but I saw some material from the Metchosin Ratepayers and Water Protection Association also interested in more protection around stream sides. So this is to have our staff take a look at what's possible and give us some advice as to what we might do. Councillor Shukin.
Thanks very much, Councillor Gray, and I'm in favor of this. The one concern I have is I feel like we're throwing staff a lot, and it's going to, I'm going to help it not intensify, but I'm not going to be able to help myself in not helping it intensify. The one question I might have is whether we can ask MISC or the Bilston Creek Group or the APRM to come to us with more information. I think it's a great initiative. I'd like to see it as full, as strong as possible in terms of setbacks from the creeks. But I hesitant to ask staff to start kind of raw on this. So
I've spoken to our planner and our interim CEO, who's Mr. Janowski, about this, and both are feeling that this is something that's readily done in the sense that there's resources available from other districts that have done this already. So there's sort of templates to look to. So I'm not feeling the same tension. It's not an idea of having this done next month, by the way. This is kind of a project. There's some other things that are going on that we are engaged in. For example, we'll be looking presumably at some changes to the OCP related to housing and those other things. So it's kind of like, is this something that would need to fit in there or not? And over a number of months, this would be looked at. I wasn't thinking it would be turned around next week or anything, just to get it on the list of the planner so that she might begin to address it, and as she's encounters the question, build, and then get back to us at an appropriate time. Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, thank you for that. As I have asked before, the why question, I believe that our setbacks are very good for this community that is not a high development community, so I understand why other communities are. Bilston Creek in my area has a floodplain, so they have restrictions already. That's just one creek. There are others, and again, there is that educational component. So if people are doing things that they shouldn't be, putting machinery in riparian zones or whatever, then certainly need to be on top of that. Some of the development proposals or variances, different things that have come to us where there's been some new builds or inquiries. Our riparian zones on every one of those reports has been noted, and then the proponent has also gone above and beyond because our OCP emphasizes the protection of environmental areas where they've been required to do things like contact SPIA, and SPIA is a much bigger setback, and we saw that with Beckingham. So those things are already in place. We've seen those come across our desk, and people are abiding by those. So again, the question is why? What has this created for us to now want to go in and make it bigger and arm people more with restrictions and more work for staff and stuff? I do believe that it is working, and if it's not, I would like to hear when, where, and why it has not worked.
Maybe I'll give you a different example. I mean, if you'd like. A different example would be that the provincial government under the Act would allow us to bring in a bylaw that would say when you go to develop a piece of property, if there's a stream on it, and if we declared, I'm going to use the example of 30 meters, some municipalities have gone 50 meters, but 30 meters, what would happen is that the new lots in the subdivision must exclude that land. So you have fewer houses or fewer lower density development on the property that has, say, the headwaters of, well, an example we just lived through is the Beckingham circumstance, Hewitt Creek. So a lot less of that land would be available to develop, and we would say, as we heard from Senator Lamb a moment ago, we'd be protecting that land for wild space. So the advantage of this is to protect more pieces of property in Metchosin. It fits with our strategic plan, it fits with our climate plan, that we would move from preservation to protection. So it's to protect this area. And while it may be one perspective that enough's being done now, I'm just asking that we get a look at it so we'd be better informed. I think there's lots to learn about this. There's actually, and I can circulate it to the committee, the riparian area a guideline book from the provincial government suggesting that municipalities take these actions. It fits with the ecosystem health, biodiversity framework, all those kinds of things. Councillor Adjourn.
Yeah, I'd support this because I think it's really important. Too often you see, where somebody buys a piece of property and then clear cuts it right up to that little narrow zone. And also when you look at that and you think, wow, that really isn't the current bylaws, or where we have the protection areas, really aren't very much. And you see the logging, cut, and then this little band of trees that then are really vulnerable to wind and so on around a creek. And I think that it's really important to look at that, especially as you said with the developments that are coming up, such as Beckingham and possibly that one on, I think it's Lindholm up there. But I think trying to have a little more in place, if it's possible, is important as far as those subdivisions go.
Thank you. And I've spoken before, this is not about targeting the Beckingham development, it's well underway. It's more, or the subdivision application as I understand, it's more the idea that we've learned from that, how we can lose land and lose protection of some of these special areas, potentially anyway. So maybe I'll make the motion that the Environment Committee recommend that Council request a staff report on the measures available to the district under the Provincial Riparian Areas Protection Act to strengthen riparian protection in Metchosin. And if I could have a seconder for that, I will. Thank you, Councillor Epp. So any further discussion? Councillor Shukin and then Mayor Little?
Yeah, I'm willing to support the motion based on your conversations, Councillor Gray, with staff, but I do think we have to be careful about how much we throw.
Agree, understand. So. And we can have that. Well, Mr. Pat's here and hearing us discussing that, so I think we're good on that front. Very little.
Yeah, I also agree, and I sort of like Councillor Shukin's suggestions that we look to other municipalities, the environmentally friendly municipalities, what have they done? We are a bit bound because the riparian areas are subject to provincial legislation. They're not legislation of the district. And so I agree, we've got the staff with a long list of things to do. We have not that many hours with our planner, and that isn't her expertise, is riparian zones, and so it would be nice if we could get sort of a summary report, as Councillor Shukin suggested, on what other municipalities are doing. I think that would be a great starting point before we consider a staff report.
Thank you. Any other comments? So I'll call the question. Are people clear on the motion that we recommend Council request a staff report on measures available to the district under the Provincial Riparian Areas Protection Act to strengthen riparian protection in Metchosin? So all in favor? That's unanimous, carried. Thank you. And Mr. Pratt, we can have a discussion just about the timing and that sort of thing, separate offline. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda was indeed the report from Stan Orchard on the Bullfrog management results, and I think we've dealt with that. And the next issue is the evaluation framework for Metchosin's climate action plan. And we heard some great comments from the public on this, and I wanted to clarify, this is not actually the plan. This is a note which I wanted to provide to you for your information on how we might evaluate the actions that we take under the plan. So the important part here wasn't the idea of going through all of the actions and saying, should we do this now, should we do that now, but just so you could have a look at what kind of evaluation criteria would be available? And this was all done by volunteers on the MISC committee. What kind of evaluation criteria might we use, and where the sources of data might be? And so it was to provide you just a sense of, when you look at the plan which we've already approved, the how might we actually know whether we did the job in a few years' time? And so that was the reason for bringing it forward. Now the question I think that arises is, how much work do we want our planner to do on this evaluation? And that's the kind of thing where I think about, we've got volunteer time put in here now, saying this is the kind of places we would get. I'll give you an example. When we think about the action at the bottom of the first page, complete extreme heat assessment and mapping. Well, the fire department would probably do that, and oh my gosh, we'll probably get that from the fire department annual report. So not a lot of effort to do it, but we want to show you how we would figure out, whether or not we're pulling off our plan or not. So much of it is just going to the annual reports of the different groups and seeing what data they might have provided us. And the idea of having the criteria, the evaluation criteria, is a sense of providing some advice, in this case, to the fire department, that example, to say this is what we were looking for in terms of knowing did we or did we not pull it off. Now we've got a few things, having mentioned the fire department, the bottom of the first page is underway. The top of the second page, investigate and apply for funding to conduct a local climate hazard and vulnerability assessment. That's already underway with the fire department. And then almost the top of the third page, encourage residents to undertake fire smart home ignition zone assessments, again, well underway by the fire department. So some of the things you'll see, those are 3 examples of things that are already being done, already being taken care of, but they're noted in here as part of our plan, things that we do want to get done. Another example would be the agricultural plan, which is underway with the agriculture select committee. So, and we think we'll get the results there, we'll be able to look to the report that comes. So just to give you a sense of what's there and what I would be discussing with the planner going forward, recognizing the limited resources that we have available for that. And then maybe I would just mention, in terms of implementation, that we do have this almost the last item on the plan, encourage a community-led climate change and sustainability lecture series. And I've become aware of, and I think we're all aware of, a new group that's formed called Reimagine West Shore, which is talking about doing some lectures on this kind of work. And so I've connected with them, and I'm going to invite them to come to an environment committee meeting to tell us about what their ideas are. Low-cost item, but something around on the educational front. So I just wanted the opportunity to show you what's here and take any comments you might have about it. And I've registered the comments from the public, so I'll discuss those more with Catherine when I have the opportunity. And if nothing today, maybe you've got it, and you can take it under advisement. Let me know if there's any concerns or if you have some better ideas about where we get data or what we might do. That would be terrific.
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
I was just wondering, where did the idea of investigate the development of a waste gasification facility come from?
It came from remember we had a public meeting, public input day, and so one of the participants there mentioned that. Yeah. I think we've had some comments, I think it was at MISC, where, we're not the size of the community to do that kind of thing. I don't see it as one of the leading items that we'd be pursuing, based on what I heard from MISC.
Yeah, I would be in favor of going down that avenue at all. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Councillor Gray, and pass on thanks to the committee. There's a lot of work that's been put in here, so.
Yeah, Mary Holm did a lot of the effort there, and Bill Cave provided some commentary, and then the committee itself took a good look at it. Thank you very much. So we'll move on now then to Council's update. I wanted to mention that, particularly to the public, that the budget talks are continuing, and I think our next meeting is on January 25 at 4 p.m. in Council Chambers, and we welcome everyone to come to the budget discussions. They're important, and public input would be much appreciated. Now, it was at the Finance Committee, I think our last Finance Committee, where we had some representatives from the CRD come and speak to us about development cost charges. Now, I'm sitting on the CRD Regional Water Commission for Metchosin and for Council, and so there's been some meetings about that, and we had a presentation which was great, and we also got some correspondence from the Urban Development Institute and a number of others in relation to developer organizations that people are building and developing in the CRD. And they've raised some questions, as I think we heard the other night, about, it's kind of like when you're talking about development cost charges, where you're going to do some improvements in the water system, and you're allocating the cost of those improvements, some to those who are already receiving water, and some to people who are building new houses and need to pay their share. And what we were learning that night was about how the share is going to be divided. So, for example, putting the at the moment the CRD made a decision to collect water from the deeper part of Souk Lake, for example. Well, that's going to come to existing users, so we're going to be charged for that, existing users. But adding the leach reservoir, well, that's for new, that's adding volume, and that's going to be paid for largely from new development. At any rate, what's happened is the development community has taken, the community, these various committees and associations have said they're not really pleased with the decision-making process. And I think they're concerned about the development cost charges and what that means to them in terms of house sales and that sort of thing. But behind it is the question about what did the last CRD board do, the one before our term, who approved all the things that are laid out. And so I'm understanding there'll be a briefing provided to myself and others at the Regional Commission shortly to sort of lay out the justification one more time for all of us. There's quite a bit of consultation done during the period, done during COVID time, so it's, I think, a legitimate concern. But the decision was reached by the CRD board that a number of things would proceed. For example, adding a leach watershed, dealing with the Souk Lake reservoir, as I've just mentioned, a water filtration plant worth, we're talking billions of dollars here, and then upgrading transmission lines. And there's some other topics as well, transmission mains, like the big pipes. At any rate, I wanted to say we're hearing a little bit about the concerns. We received some correspondence. I think we've all received it as council. And I'll do my best to come back with a report to lay out just the rationale for the initial decision about this multi-billion-dollar investment. Much of it is in relation to increased need for water, but also protection as the climate changes. Things like algae blooms as the water gets warmer, and sedimentation and things like that. Mayor, I heard the other day that you'd met with the mayors, some West Coast Shore mayors, and learned a little bit about it. We could talk back and forth maybe when I come back, and if there's anything extra we should add to a report just to give everybody up to speed, that would be good.
Yeah, and I believe that the Water Commission is going to be briefed on Wednesday regarding this, and it's correct that the previous board did, I think it was June of 2022, made a number of recommendations, and those reports are available online, but fully transparent. The Stantec report was, I think it was signed off by either 8 or 12 engineers. So what they are planning to do is they're looking to the future. So they want safe drinking water into the future, and they're trying to create redundancies in the system so that if something happens, we've got an alternate source of safe and adequate supply of drinking water. And that will cost money. Also, there will be a component of that is a filtration component to that, and that will be expensive. And I've looked through the documents. We had a meeting today actually to discuss some of this, and I applaud the CRD for looking way into the future, because if you look at our past record, and I say ours and other people had looked to the future to today, we are well positioned with adequate and good drinking water. And so I can understand from the developers' point of view that they're upset about this. And they've put up this one report, and it was signed off by an engineer. But I also think we have to think to the future, and I applaud people that are visionaries. Yeah, so more to come on this.
Yeah, I'm with you on
But all
that.
of those reports, if all you have to do is go to the CRD website and look at that, they're all there.
Thank you. And there's it sounded like there was quite a process in terms of consultation. Maybe that wasn't picked up as much, but the rationale appears to be there. But I'll come back and just lay out whatever I can, just so we're all on the same page, at least with information. The last thing I want to mention was this draft of biodiversity and ecosystem health framework that's been put out by the provincial government. It's quite, I think, an exciting document. It fits well with our goal here in Metchosin to support biodiversity as best we can under our climate emergency and biodiversity crisis declaration. And looking at the clock, there's still time for members of the public to send in a note about it. They're looking for feedback up until the end of today. All of council and MISC have all been encouraged to send it individually. We didn't have the right schedule to get it to a meeting and provide a feedback. I think many people are very happy with it. It's many years coming, and the couple of things that might be that I've noticed different NGOs are advocating for are issues like, could we have some solid numbers here in terms of when the work will be done, make sure there's a Species at Risk Act. It's mostly about nailing it down as opposed to saying it's not a good report. It's more like it's a great report, but could we be specific in terms of making sure we get it done. So just commending that to you and anyone who has the time before now midnight to get in and comment about it. I'd be happy to talk to anybody who wants to, or would like some references to look at others who've taken a look at the report. So the next item on our agenda yes, and of course, yes, in correspondence from Lavina, Rojas, a Victoria resident, about the use of glue traps for pest management. And so we've received quite a number of, a variety of pieces of correspondence on glue traps. And what we've been asked to do is consider if we might be involved in bringing an end to the use of these glue traps. What I mean by that's a road, you've looked at the materials, rodent glue boards, and they're worried about suffering of the rodents as they die, that they're indiscriminate, birds and other animals get caught in these, and not an effective long-term rodent measure. Now, of course, my thinking was, well, this is actually looks like a reasonable thing to do, but I don't know if the district has a big role in this kind of thing, except to advocate perhaps to the province and or to retail places. So I don't know more about it, and imagine this, I was going to say, well, let's ask the staff to give us a heads up about what we might do. But I'm taking some signals from earlier conversations. Maybe what I'll do is do myself a little bit more investigation about that. Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, well, I think what's interesting in the very first one here on page 37 is the person is suggesting maybe it gets proposed to the book of resolutions that coming up in April. So I'm wondering if yourself and MISC could put something together in the way of a resolution. The due date, I think, is February 7th for those to be submitted. Yeah. So it might be some time to do something like that.
Good idea.
And it's in Victoria this year, so we don't have to travel.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was thinking we might have been out of time, but I could work on that certainly. Whether we could get it, well, let's give it a try. It's the timing of our meetings and all that, and getting it back to Environment Committee and then to Council. But good notion. And there's a little bit more research I could do with the BCA just about where the change would need to be made. Sound okay? I'll do that now. Super. And I think that brings us to the end of our agenda. There were the pinks, which we had. Some correspondence from Beth Bacon and Sue Stevens. And One was about the glue traps, and the other was about the Bullfrog control program. So I think we've looked at both of those, and we'll just take those up having been received. So with that, I'll call for a motion to adjourn the Environment Areas Meeting. Moved by Mayor Little, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor? Thanks so much. So we'll just change seats here, and we'll be back at our next meeting.